So I'm going to kind of stand over here so everybody on the PC can hear me as well, okay? All right, so everybody welcome. Thanks for coming. Couple things going on. Friday and Saturday, December 3rd and 4th, that is this coming weekend. Tomorrow is the 1st of December, guys. Hard to believe we're almost the end of the year. Ohio Linux Fest is coming up. It's at the Hyatt Regency in Columbus. If you are interested, it is www.olfconference.org is the website. You can look that, we'll have that on the website, of course. We are not having a holiday party this year, just because of, you know, with the ups and downs. Yeah, out of abundance of caution, plus with the ups and downs, we didn't know how things were going to go with COVID. So instead of making, Still don't, exactly. So instead of rushing it or, you know, something of that line, we decided this year we're going to go ahead and postpone it. Cross your fingers for next year. Let's see. Can look at my watch again.
Have to have it outdoors next year.
Yeah, maybe we'll have it outdoors. Well, the good news is we usually hold it here. So, and they have it in a big area over there. That's pretty open. So hopefully next year things calm down and more things happen, that things will be maybe 90% back to normal. All right, so December 2nd, we have the genealogy SIG. Anybody want to say anything about that?
We're going to have it
Online or
online, definitely online.
Zoom meeting? So keep your eye open for email.
Yes.
Keep your eye
Let
open.
me know if you want an email, if you want to be included.
Did you guys catch that? If you want to be included on the genealogy SIG, let Gladys know so she can send you the link for the Zoom meeting, because it will be online. December 3rd, 10th, and 17th, which are all Fridays. They're having the Python self-study. If you pick up one of the newsletters here, there's a link on here. I imagine it's for the meetings. They will not be doing it on the 24th for obvious reasons. Classic computers on the 4th and the 18th by phone. Gary, did you want to say anything?
No, things are still going on okay. Steve's working on some projects that sound really interesting. If we have something down at Sinclair in February or not, we haven't heard anything on details on that yet either.
And speaking of old computers, not so much of an old computer, but they are releasing, if you are interested, they are releasing 3 brand new, never released Atari 2600 cartridges. There are 3 games that were originally scheduled to be released. They are releasing them as part of like the anniversary, and they will play on the old Atari 2600s. One of them is a continuation of Yar's Revenge, and I can't remember the other 2. I did look them up. They're about $50 a piece. The 2600s are popping up like freaking crazy on Facebook and Craigslist. So if you're into that, like I was, you can get you a brand new Atari 2600 game, brand new. Go ahead.
Gary,
Yes.
one of the things I saw at Menards during this Black Friday stuff, they were selling a 2600 gaming machine with, I think they said 100 games on it. So I don't know if anyone saw that or not.
Well, these are brand new cartridges. They're games that were meant to be released, and they're releasing the cartridges now.
Yeah, this was the machine.
Yeah, I've seen those before. Let's see, DMA trustee meeting is this coming Monday at 7 o'clock. It will be on Zoom again. Dynamic languages is December 8th at 7
That's right.
p.m. at the Innovation Hub. Somebody have anything to say about that?
I haven't announced it, but we're going to be talking about the new switch case statement in Python and Ruby. Yeah.
In Innovation Hub, where's that at?
Oh, that is right across from the downtown bus station. It is part of the arcade complex. You get to look out into the new arcade rotunda, which is pretty cool.
Okay, and then it's online too, of course.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Nasdaq meeting is on December 9th. For anybody that's interested in Nasdaq, it's at 6 o'clock. Gift exchange. It's a white elephant. So the gift can be sold up to 2 times. The second person gets to keep it. $10 minimum, $10 maximum on a gift. Did you want to say anything about the Python self-study?
Catherine's
Yes.
wiring
Okay.
up here.
You are right. We are not going to, well, let me think. I guess we are going to have it Friday, even though I might be joining from Linux Fest. The time has been moved from noon to 2 o'clock. Other than that, everybody's welcome. We try, it's very, very informal. We try to keep it very beginner friendly, particularly if you're interested in learning Python.
Okay, so this December 3rd is going to be at 2 o'clock instead of 12 o'clock.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. They're all moved to 2 o'clock for the foreseeable future. Where are you
Okay.
getting that off of? I need to get it changed there.
Gladdy has it on the newsletter. So Gladdy,
I
they'll
will.
need to update that to 2 o'clock. Okay,
Thank you.
Catherine, probably meetup needs to be adjusted also.
yeah.
Oh, did I not just meet up? Oh, thank you. All right.
I don't know if Pat's on yet or not.
No.
Not yet. Okay, so December 14th is the investment SIG, Martin.
The one thing I wanted to mention, maybe a little bit of misunderstanding, we use Google Meet, not Zoom, for the investment SIG meeting.
So Google Meets is what the investment SIG uses for anybody that couldn't hear that online.
Oh, Gary, there's now an email under the calendar. You can see there's investment sig at DMA1.
Yes, there's now an email on investment for the investment SIG. So it's investment_SIG@dma1.org for those that are interested. December 16th is the Linux SIG, 7 o'clock, 348 Russ Engineering Building at Wright State. Gary, did you want to say anything?
There's a new release of Debian, Bullseye, and if you're interested in open source stuff or Linux or BSD, you come to either because you probably got that there. You can either join us via Zoom or join us in person.
All right. Sorry? Okay.
It's a little hard to hear.
He was just talking about if you're interested in installing Linux, there's a new version of Devon out called Bullseye that was just released. So if you're interested in any of that, come on out at 7 o'clock. The Apple Dayton SIG has been canceled for December 20th. For those that also December 21st is the winter solstice, longest night of the year. After that,
Shortest night.
Thank you for the correction. Yes, shortest night of the year.
No, shortest day.
Shortest day.
Yeah.
Shortest day, longest
You're
night.
right.
Yeah.
Longest night, shortest day.
Yep. After that, the days start getting longer again. And then, of course, we all know what December 25th is. If you need me to tell you, I will, but I'll leave you guessing otherwise. All right.
Gary, I got a question.
Yes, sir.
This is Peter. There has been some chatter amongst the board members about a December meeting, moving our usual neat stuff I got for Christmas type presentation to December instead of having it in the usual traditional January. Has there been a decision made on that?
Let's see, that would be
28th, I believe.
the 28th. So normally, we do not have a meeting in December because we usually have the Christmas part. I don't think last year we did either one. So there hasn't really been a lot of discussion on it yet, but so far, I think a few people have said status quo of not having a meeting, but is there any interest in the December meeting? It is December 28th. It's right after Christmas, pretty much a couple of days. I know a lot of people are going to be traveling. A lot of people are off. I know I'm off. And it's just before New Year's. So as the group that's here now, is everybody okay with not going with the meeting? I guess we could do a show of hands. Not having it?
Oh, not having. They're doing it both.
Anybody get cheese curds?
Yeah.
Okay.
The left hand if you want it, and the right hand is.
No. All right. So a show of hands, who would like to have a December meeting?
Who wants cheese curds?
Cheese sticks. So we have what, 3, 4? Okay, 4. And who could care less? How about you guys online?
Online can vote with their reactions, thumbs up or something. That's what I'm doing. I'm in favor of it because I always thought it was a great distance between Christmas and the end of January meeting. It seems to me you almost get bored with new technology by that time. So
Yeah, but it gives you time to play with your new technology too.
well, it does, but just everybody, when you get a new toy, you got to work it out. Yeah, at least you got some stuff to investigate. And Gary, you've always done a great job with hosting the neat stuff I got for Christmas type meetings.
Right. Okay, so I'm not seeing very many people voting online here.
I did, but somebody keeps knocking me off. There you go.
Okay.
I did too, but yeah.
3. Well, right now, guys, with the people that are voting, the skipping the meeting seems to be the winner so far. Okay.
Well, then can we get the TJ Chumps even available?
I don't think they even reserved it.
I haven't asked it. I would imagine it's probably.
It has not been officially reserved. So, I mean, it's not 100%, but glad he hasn't asked yet either. So, I mean, it's hit or miss, to be honest with you, because 'tis the Christmas season, so.
Well, we could just have we could have a Zoom meeting only, I guess.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Just do a Zoom meeting for those that are interested.
We could talk about all the toys we got for Christmas.
Yeah, we could do
Better odds for the price.
I think it'll be an informal meeting. We'll make it, if we do the Zoom meeting, it'll be an informal meeting without the door prizes and everything, just to not make it so complicated.
That would be the way to go.
I think that would be the best way. Okay, so Peter, I guess we'll go ahead and just do it an all Zoom meeting for those that are interested. And that way, for those that are traveling and you want something to do, there you go.
What I'll do is I'll create the meeting and then put the and post the link in Meetup right
There you
away.
go.
So and I'll do the board meeting too, in case. Well, I won't post the link for the board meeting, but I will for our general meeting.
Okay.
Also, I have some other DMA news when you're ready.
Go ahead.
A lot of people may not be aware of this, but Martin has won an award for us.
Yes.
He won second place in APCUG's newsletter contest, and I think probably he would have won first if he would have had a greater contribution from myself and from a lot of others, from members contributing to the newsletter. I'm sure he would have won first then, but he's as I've said, he's always done a terrific job with the newsletter, and we look forward to seeing it every month. Congratulations, Martin.
Thanks, Martin.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so you heard Peter mention, okay, guys, that Martin can always use content. So Martin, you have the link on our webpage or something so we can send you
Yeah.
content?
editor@dma1.org. That will go right to my, there's no secret about my regular email.
So if you have an idea for an article or something, something that interests you that you just want to write about that's computer related, technology related, send it to Martin. Martin, you still take advertisements too, don't you?
Yeah, yeah. If any of you have a business card, you're a paid up member of DMA, I can put your business card in the database. And I can embed, if your business has a website, I can embed a link so that if you click on the image of the business card, it'll take you to the website.
So let's all help Martin next year get number one, okay? All right. Thank you, Martin. Great job. Okay, so do we usually do the have you heard before or after?
We normally have the speaker at 7 o'clock, then we do the calendar, and,
I'm so used to the old ways.
yeah.
All right, guys. Well, we knocked out the stuff. Sorry, I did get things backwards. I'm rusty. I haven't done this in a while. By the way, for all the people that don't know me, I am Gary. I am the president. So, hello. So without further ado, Dave, I didn't mean to step on your toes there.
Oh, no problem.
So today's presentation is going to be on Raspberry. Is it just Raspberry Pi or Raspberry Pi Zero?
Raspberry Pi.
Okay,
And
so
we will highlight 0.
okay, so we're going to be talking about Raspberry Pi. We do have 2 door prizes over there, which are Raspberry Pi Zeros. And he's going to hit on that a little bit, but he's going to explain the details on this little screamer. He'll be running through the specs and talk about how easy it is to program one of these. Dave is a longtime member of DMA, a past presenter, and has plenty of experience with all varieties of Raspberry Pi. Dave usually brings a Raspberry Pi with him to the picnics and has one set up and running for people to check out. So he's our guru on these kind of things. So without further ado, Dave Schwab.
Thank you, Gary.
Hang on, let me mute this real quick.
Yeah, if everybody would mute, we do pick up your background noise. Please use the hand, raise your hand when you want to ask a question. We'll try to support all of that as we go. And I hope you can see my screen properly. Okay, it's been several years since we talked about Raspberry Pis, and basically when the Pi 4 came out. So what I want to do is get started with a review of what a Raspberry Pi is and is not. So I'm going to use Raspberry Pi and Arduino kind of in the generic term. There's a number of boards, since both of these projects are open hardware. So the designs out there, you can rebuild them yourself if you want. The Raspberry Pi, and I'm going to use RPI as shortcut for Raspberry Pi in this text, is a small single board computer. It is based on a system on a chip, also called an SoC. There's basically one chip with all of the components needed to run the computer. It's a very small form factor. This thing's about the size of a deck of cards. It runs a complete operating system. Raspberry Pi OS, or Raspberry OS is the new name for that. Twister, Ubuntu, and I really didn't want to bring this up, but it was brought up earlier. There is a stripped down version of Windows that runs on a Raspberry Pi. The Raspberry Pi supports a graphical user interface. So we have a nice screen, everything to look at with our video output. User input is typically from a keyboard and a mouse. This is where I'm going to blur things a good bit. The Raspberry Pi has a 40-pin I/O header. It has 26 digital I/O pins. These are things you can hook to switches, lights, things of that nature. Turn these things on, listen for a switch to turn on. They've got a UART and 2 other serial ports that are used to talk to things like thermometers, etc. Yes, George?
Yeah, are you going to advance the slides? We're still on the opening slide.
Oh, I'm still advancing them.
All right, because all we're seeing on the Zoom share is the opening slide.
Okay, I might have to do it this way rather than as a slideshow. So the basic point here is that this is a computer running a complete operating system. But it does have I/O, digital pins. You're not going to get this on a Windows computer or some other laptop. Where the Arduino is a microcontroller. It does not really have an operating system. It has a boot ROM. And all that boot ROM will do is execute the code that you have loaded, or it will load the code for you, depending on how you talk to it. The code you run on a microcontroller is generated on a host computer, then downloaded to the microcontroller. The Arduino particularly has 14 digital I/O pins, 6 analog pins. These are hooked to a digital to A, D to A converter, and we have serial input and output. The big advantage of an Arduino for using this input is that it has a very fast response to input. It will support what's called an interrupt, and specifically it's a hardware interrupt. Okay, the interrupt will tell the computer, the microcontroller, to stop what you're doing right now and service the interrupt, take care of this input, and then come back to what you were doing. Where the Raspberry Pi, while it's running its code in the operating system, may miss when a small input comes along. So example, if you're using this to monitor the speed of a bicycle and you get 1 pulse every time the wheel goes around, an Arduino will pick that up, where a Raspberry Pi may miss that input. So pretty much they work together if you want to. In fact, I have a board that I bought from the Arduino, or from Raspberry Pi organization, that actually has an Arduino on it. So both are available to you. Okay, so let's get into the Raspberry Pi lineup. Kind of amazing. As of May of this year, more than 40 million Raspberry Pi boards have been sold. Now that's a grand total. George, is there a problem?
No, if I have the thing up, I'm fine, Dave. I'm just listening.
Okay, I see your hand up, that's all. Okay. So 40 million of these things are out there. That's a grand total of all the boards, not just any particular one. My point here is too, that I want you to know what you're going to buy. If you go down and order one of these things and you order the least expensive one, it may not do what you want to do. And we'll see that here in a few minutes. So I'm going to go over the lineup and then we'll talk about some specifics. The original Raspberry Pi was released way back in 2012. It was a single core 32-bit processor with all of 256 megabytes. I say 256 megabytes. I remember when I was running the dial-up system that we had, I would have died for 256K bytes, let alone megabytes. Later in 2012, the Model A was released. It's a stripped down version. Of course, you release Model B before you release Model A. And then in 2014, they upgraded to the B plus and A plus, which brought up 512 megabytes of memory and a bigger IO header. Still only had one USB port. Raspberry 2 came to us in 2015, and we jumped to a 900 megabytes, 32-bit quad-core processor and a full gigabyte of RAM. And this is where we first got 4 USB ports. I think at that time we weren't even calling them 2.0. They were just USB ports. Had a 100 megabit Ethernet connector, and it had our 40-pin GPIO header on it. A little bit later than that, it was a following year, I believe, we had the revision 1.2, which got us a 64-bit quad-core processor. Unfortunately, to this day, we still have a 32-bit operating system from Raspberry Pi. Raspberry Pi came out in 2016. Early in the year, went up to 1.2 gigahertz, still had a 64-bit quad-core processor, and now we got onboard Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and we were capable of USB boot capabilities. Unfortunately, this USB boot was in a hard-coded ROM on the chip, so you had to blow a fuse. There was software to do that. Once done, you could not reverse it. So you were stuck using USB boot if you wanted it. Interesting, on Pi Day 2018, they announced the upgraded Model B Plus, which brought us to a 1.4 gigahertz processor. June of 2019, Raspberry Pi 4 came in to the party. 1.5 gigahertz, 64-bit ARM processor, 2 HDMI ports with up to 4K resolution, boot from USB. Now the boot ROM is a flash ROM, so it could be updated, and then with several versions of the software, it has been updated. It uses a USB port C type for power, and that's a 5 volt at 3 amps for this board. We'll get into that some more. It's got 2 USB 2s and 2 USB 3 ports. When it first came out, a 1 gigabit memory ROM version was $35. Well, they're no longer manufacturing that. So the 2 gigabit that came out at $45 has been reduced to $35. 4 gigabyte is $55 and 8 gigabyte sells for $75. We've got a 32-bit operating system. how much memory can we address with 32 bits? 4 gigs. So they do a trick and do a paging system, switch between the upper and lower page. There is a 64-bit operating system currently in beta test from Raspberry Pi. We'll get a little closer look at our Raspberry Pi 4 here. I don't know if you can see my mouse or not, but we'll go over some of the features that we've got on the board. The big guy in the center, that's your system on the chip, your SoC, right here in the middle. The black chip next to it is your memory. The silver chip up in the upper corner is the Bluetooth and Wi-Fi transceiver. This on the left side of the board, this black and white connector is a serial display interface. This is specifically meant to go to a flat screen, to a liquid crystal type monitor. On the top of the board, we have our 40-pin I/O header. And hidden back in here is support for power over Ethernet. Then we've got our gigabit Ethernet on the upper right corner. You can see the 2 blue USB 3 connectors next to it. And on the lower edge, we have 2 USB 2 connectors. Behind it on the bottom is a barrel or a pin type connector. This has got 4 channels on it, which carries composite video and right and left audio. Next to it is another one of those edge connectors for a Raspberry Pi camera. And actually the cameras do real well. Then we've got our 2 micro HDMI ports, and then our USB power supply. The SD-ROM goes up in the left side on the bottom. Just quick little output here of our GPIO. We do have 5 volts available here. You can use to power additional boards. There's 3.3 volts you can use to power additional boards, several ground connections, and all of your digital I/O and serial ports are here. Okay. Just recently, November 9th, Eben Upton, he is the creator of the Raspberry Pi and CEO of Raspberry Pi Training, has announced an upgrade to 1.8 gigahertz on new boards. You got to look for a board with the 3 little chips that are shown in the circle. They've replaced the linear power supply with a switching power supply, providing a little bit more current to the system on a chip. So we get a little bit of a boost here. Also on November 9th, the Raspberry OS has been upgraded. Gary mentioned Bullseye, the Debian Bullseye. The Raspberry OS is based on Debian, so it's now been updated to this new release called Bullseye. Debian calls their releases by the names of the toys from Toy Story. So we had Jessie and Buster, our previous versions that we had. Now it is Bullseye. And that's the horse character. If you've got a bigger board with 2 gigabytes or more, this upgrade gives you some fancier graphics, shadows on windows, animation when you go over things, a few things like that, but most of the improvements are behind the scene, giving you better performance. One is the new library camera support. And unfortunately, if you had camera running previously, when you upgrade to this version, it won't run. All of the commands for the camera have been changed. So be aware of that if you're going to use the camera. There's a bunch of upgrades already released for this in the last few days. Expect more. Here we go, Raspberry Pi Zero. Originally released in 2015, the Raspberry Zero is a half-size board. They kind of cut the board in half along the x-axis. This thing is really tiny. It had the power of the Raspberry Pi 2, the processor. It had 512 megabytes of memory, and it was selling for $5. I've seen it for $4.50 lately. And then again in February of 2017, the Raspberry Pi Zero W came out. This added Wi-Fi and Bluetooth to the Raspberry Pi Zero and upped the price to $10. In this year's October 21, the new Raspberry Pi Zero 2 W was released, and it's running a custom made system on a chip. It's still a Broadcom chip, but it's made specifically for Raspberry Pi, and it is about 5 times faster than the previous Raspberry Pi Zero. Wi-Fi and Bluetooth on it, and it's going to sell for $15. Those are list prices from Raspberry Pi. I hope you guys can see this fairly well. That picture is about half again the size of the actual Raspberry Pi. So I'm going to start with the big black chip in the center. That is the custom processor with the memory on board. Interesting, the previous Raspberry Pi Zeros had their memory chip soldered onto the PC board underneath the processor chip, so you couldn't get to them. Across the top is the header. The stock boards do not include a header already soldered in. That may be an option in the future. They did that on the Zeros before. Over on the right-hand side is a camera port. That is that digital serial port for the camera. On the right lower edge is a USB type connector. These are the style that you would have on your telephones, your cell phones. The first one is for power only. The second one is USB. And then the silver chip is our controller for Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. And there is a connector for LAN there, if you want to solder it in. A mini HDMI port. So now we're using every one of the standard HDMI connectors, full size, mini, and micro. So you're going to need a special cable to run this particular card. The micro SD slot on the end, and away we go. Any questions at this point? Yes, George.
You had made mention that there's a place there to put a LAN connector. It'll actually do network 10 base T or 10 gig or what?
No, actually that connector is for the wireless, for an antenna.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, good question. Appreciate that. Raspberry Pi 400. This was released in November of 2020. I had my first one in November 2020. It's basically a Raspberry Pi 4, but it's on a new printed circuit board. The circuit board's about the same size as the keyboard. It's got a system on a chip that runs at 1.8, just like the new released 4s, because it had the switching power supply from the beginning. Big, larger board allowed them to do that. There's a large heat sink, also about the size of the keyboard. It's a big piece of sheet metal, stamped so that it fits, and is bonded with heat sink material to the CPU. And I've tested mine and pushed it hard, and it does not overheat. So I'm very pleased with that. As you can see, power, I/O, HDMI, USB are all on the back of the keyboard. This is a little bit of a small keyboard. It's not a full-size keyboard, but it's not one of these little mini things. So it's fairly comfortable to use. Raspberry Pi Foundation sells this as a kit. And if you're just getting started into the Raspberry Pi, I highly recommend buying the kit, because it includes the power supply, the mouse, HDMI cable, SD card with the OS already on it, and a book of how to use it and projects to do. Interestingly, the book weighs more than the rest of the kit put together. Okay. But this is a good way to get started if you want to learn about Linux, you want to learn about Raspberry Pi. Nice system. $100 for the kit, $70 for the Raspberry Pi 400 without all the options. So far, everything we've talked about from Raspberry Pi has been a microcomputer, running a nice operating system, keyboard, graphics, everything you want. So in January of this year, Raspberry Pi Foundation brought out the Pico. It's a microcontroller, very much like our Arduino. It does have a custom chip on it for Raspberry Pi. You program this in 2 versions of Python, one called MicroPython and CircuitPython, or the other. Those are specifically for doing I/O. Interesting thing, when you connect to a computer and push that boot select button as you plug it in, the Pico will look like a disk drive on your PC. So when you write your code, you just drop it right to the microprocessor. Go ahead, Peter. You're muted.
Thank you. Question about the last one we were looking at, the one that was about the size of a keyboard, the
Yes.
400, I believe it was.
Yes, sir.
Do you have an estimate? Thank you. Do you have an estimate on the price?
Oh, I got better than an estimate. Raspberry Pi has said it will be $100 for the kit.
Okay.
And if you buy it without the kit, it's $70.
Okay.
Now, the other day I was at Micro Center, which is a distributor, and they only had 2 of them left on the shelf.
Wow.
So hopefully they're getting more stock.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. So we got the Raspberry Pi Pico. This is kind of a deviation for Raspberry Pi in that it is not a computer, although it will talk to your Raspberry Pi quite nicely through its USB port. So you could look for switches to be switched, turn lights on, etc., either entirely from this device or with the help of another device. And the last one I'm going to talk about here is the Raspberry Pi compute modules. The Raspberry Pi compute module is a Raspberry Pi 4, basically, but without any I/O. No USB, no video, no Ethernet on the board. These compute modules are to be used with a motherboard, very much like we're used to in building our own computers. All of the power of the Raspberry Pi is on this thing, and you can buy these boards in different configurations depending on what you want to do. The compute module is available with or without Wi-Fi, and something new, it's got a solid state disk on board. That's an option you can buy. There's like 7 configurations depending on what you want in it. But you can get up to a 32 gigabyte eMMC, and that's that black chip at the top of the CM4 module. There's a YouTube blogger, Gerling is his name. He has used this compute module in a number of projects, and you can buy like a laptop that's based on this. You can buy a version of this that has up to 10 hard drives to make a network attached storage. And he just the other day he had one where he had, I think it was 6 CM4s on the board to do parallel computing. Of course, all this is a bit expensive, but it's out there. I alluded to this a little bit ago, that we could have some power supply problems. Okay. The input voltage on all Raspberry Pi boards is 5 volts. Typically, you're going to be doing it 5.1, something like that. All of your I/O pins on that 40-pin I/O connector, all the input and output pins are 3.3 volts. If you apply 5 volts to one of those pins, at minimum, you will kill that input. Most likely completely toast your Raspberry Pi. Nobody wants burnt Raspberry Pi. The 40-pin GPIO header does have a 5 volt and a 3.3 volt power pin that you can use to power other projects. So if you need power for a temperature sensor, a gas monitor, any of those kind of things that you can get as an add-on board to your Raspberry Pi, there is power on the header for that. If you're running a Raspberry Pi 4 or a Pi 400 for that matter, it should have a 3 amp power supply. If you don't have enough current to run your Raspberry Pi, it will go into a reboot loop. You'll see the splash screen, which is called a rainbow screen. It's just a bunch of colors. You'll see some code start to go by, and then it'll drop back into the splash screen, and it will just be caught in that loop. Okay, so if you're going to do a Raspberry Pi 4, make sure you get a power supply that will do 3 amps. I recommend the power supply that comes from Raspberry Pi. It's not all that expensive. Early Raspberry Pi 4 boards cannot select the voltage on a good USB-C power supply. They cheaped out and they didn't put a resistor on that USB-C connector to tell it what power to supply. So if you've got a good USB power supply, especially one that supports fast charging for your cell phone or maybe a laptop or a tablet, matter of fact, the one that comes with Apple tablets and Apple laptops will burn up an early Raspberry Pi because it can supply up to 24 volts. Rule number 1, all of our boards want 5 volt input. Once you're up and running, if your voltage starts to drop on the OS, on the display, you will see a little lightning bolt down in the corner That's an indicator that your voltage is dropping, that your power supply can't keep up. So we need to be aware very much of what power supply we're using with our Raspberry Pi. So here we are. I did this last time. How did I spend $300 to get my $35 computer running? Mr. Ganger, not all of us have a bunch of supplies sitting behind us. So I'm assuming that we're all going to go out and buy all this equipment. So I'm going to buy a Raspberry Pi Model 4, and I'm not going to get the $35 model because I want more memory. So that's going to be $55 for the 4 gig, or maybe $75 for the 8 gig model. I need to buy a power supply, and I recommend the one from Raspberry Pi organization. Now I need an SD card. Just like before, 8 gigabytes, 16 gigabytes, that's probably too small for me. And every time we jump up in size, they cost more. Optionally, depending on who you buy it from, you can get a SD card with the operating system already loaded. Well, my Raspberry Pi has 2 micro HDMI outputs. So instead of buying 1 cable, I'll probably buy 2. HDMI monitor has to be added to the system. I usually get a 24-inch or bigger. At my age, bigger is better. Maybe 2 of them, because I do have 2 outputs. Keyboard and mouse, and I like the wireless combo, so you only use 1 of your USB ports for the wireless combo. So really easy. I'm pushing $300 to get this system put together. Of course, if you've got the stuff on hand, that's not a problem, right? So for a lot of people that want to get into a Raspberry Pi, I'm going to recommend you buy the Raspberry Pi 400 kit. It's got the 4 gigabyte Raspberry Pi 4 in the keyboard. It comes with an SD card with the operating system already loaded.
Seems as if Dave is locked up.
Yeah, looks like he's frozen.
Yep. Does anybody have any comments from the audience, or does anybody with online have any comments regarding this or any DMA news?
As long as we don't get kicked off here, because he is the host. So, oh, you're the host now, Peter.
Yep, that's okay. We're still
You
recording.
must have had to reboot or something.
Yeah, that's what I'm figuring. All right. Any
Well, I can add a little bit more to what he was saying. I did buy the kit 400 and it did have everything on it. But when I bought it, it still didn't have the new operating system. So I've got the new card, and I'll have to load the new Raspberry operating system to get it up to the full part.
Now, what
Also-
kind of, what are you using to do your visual in and out on that normally? A regular monitor?
Well, I've got a regular TV sitting here
Oh.
in the, actually, the one where I'm on right now is an HDMI monitor without audio. And then I've got a regular TV sitting up above it that has the full HDMI. When I knew that I was going to get to 400, and which I did buy the 400 unit with the 4 gig memory, and I went to Ollie's, and they had a $69 special on television sets. Well, got two of them. So I got my two monitors now for that. I did buy the 8 gig unit, but that's another one of those things where I've got so many other things to do that I haven't got to that point yet. I see Dave's back with a video. I don't know if he knows that he got knocked off or not. He's still muted.
I lost power.
Ah, that's what it was.
Oh, yeah, because you just all of a sudden, we didn't hear from you.
Yeah, my power went off. This computer doesn't happen to be on a UPS, but maybe
Right.
that's a change I need to make.
But what, did it just go out for a second or something, or what?
Yeah, just for a second.
Okay,
Okay, are we back in business?
looks like it. We'll let you get back at it here.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
We were just filling time while you were gone. We figured something like that happened.
Yep, hoping we can get through this. So anyway, if you're just getting into learning about Linux, want to experiment with the Raspberry Pi or some of the things that are on the Raspberry Pi, there's a lot of programming capabilities on the Raspberry. This is a good kit to get started with. And it control your cost and you get everything all at one time. So well worth it. So where do I get my Raspberry Pi? Well, any one of these people would be glad to ship one to you. We are lucky here in the Dayton area that Micro Center is only 50 miles south of us in Sharonville. And they are 70 miles east of us, just off the campus of the Ohio State University in Columbus. They carry the Raspberry Pi products. They also carry the SparkFun and Adafruit products. So if there's a board, an add-on board, a temperature sensor, audio board, something like that that you want, they also have those in stock at Micro Center. CanaKit specializes in selling the Raspberry Pi in kit form. So whichever Raspberry Pi you want, you can get it from CanaKit with power supply, cables, SD card, however you like it. Very nice shipping. They're very prompt. I've been happy with their service. So any of these will work.
There is another thing. Best Buy does sell some of the CanaKits. In case anyone wants that.
Yes. I've been disappointed though going over to Best Buy and what I can get. So I recommend Micro Center or one of the mail order houses. Okay, so once we get our hardware and we're ready to go, we need an operating system. And while there are several operating systems available, I'm going to focus on the one from Raspberry Pi, Raspberry OS. And we just heard from the CEO of Raspberry that they've updated to the new Debian version. So if you go download right now, that's what you're going to get. And it's a free download from raspberrypi.com. When you get there, you're going to be faced with 3 choices, or more actually. There's a couple of versions of the Raspberry Pi operating system that you would run on your PC or your Mac. So you can simulate running a Raspberry Pi. But to download the actual Raspberry OS to burn for your computer, there are 3 versions of it. Number 1 is the GUI, graphical user interface, with recommended software. And off to the right, you see just one sample of the software that is included with the GUI version. I just touched programming, and you see several IDEs, integrated development environments for different softwares, Java, Python, etc. You see Scratch, which is a help for teaching, especially children, how to program. It's kind of fun. You just drag and drop modules and stack them up and it'll run the program. You got your Sonic Pi, you got Sense Hat, which is an external board. You got Node Red, which is specifically for programming I/O, turn your lights on, turn the lights off, sense daylight, stuff like that. And something really neat, the Wolfram Mathematica package. Now, this is a subscription service. Normally, you've got to pay for Mathematica. Raspberry Pi has gotten a deal that it's included when you download the GUI with recommended software. This is a high-end mathematics package. Really, really nice, especially being that it's free. The second option you have is the GUI with minimal user software. This has got the graphics, the mouse interface, everything you want, but there is very limited software downloaded. So when you download this, it's a much smaller package. It'll run on a smaller SD card. It does include a tool which will download all the other stuff for you. So if you want to bring it up, you can, but it's just a smaller download. And then if you're into Linux and want a very fast, quick system, maybe you're running a Raspberry Pi Zero to control some things, to run a camera, you can get the command line version. This is text only. There's a little sample of what that looks like. It's classic Linux. So I did an LS, which is the equivalent of list. And then I did a PWD, which is print working directory. And very typical Linux. So very small download, very fast when you run it this way. So we've got two options when we download this. And one of the things you can download from Raspberry Pi is the Raspberry Pi Imager. The Imager is kind of unique in that when you choose an OS in the box on the left, it will download it as it does the write to your SD card. So it takes care of the download. For me, the problem with that is it doesn't download a zip file, it downloads individual components. And it takes a little bit longer than doing the zip file. I like to use Balena Etcher. The advantage of Etcher is that it writes for most anything that you want to make a bootable disk for. If you're going to download the latest Ubuntu, you can use Etcher to create your SD card or whatever you're going to boot from, as well as Raspberry Pi. It's a free download, and you simply select the image file and then select the drive you want to write it to and hit flash, and away you go. You're going to have it in a few minutes. Neat thing about Etcher is it unzips the file as it does the write, so you don't have to separately take it out of the zip file. Now with both of these, you need to be very careful. They will write to any drive on your computer. So if you write to your boot drive, it's going to get written over. So be very careful selecting which drive you want to do. So once we get the SD card burned and we're ready to go, we're going to install that in our Raspberry Pi. We're going to connect our keyboard, mouse, HDMI, and possibly a network. We're going to connect power. And as soon as we connect power, this Raspberry Pi is going to start. We should see the lights on the Raspberry Pi start to flash, and then we'll see the splash screen. Once we see the rainbow splash screen, it'll be only a few seconds, and we'll start to see the setup screen. The setup screen will expand the operating system to use all of your SD card. The version of the system that we download is meant for a minimum sized SD card. I think that's the 8 GB. So if you would try to store some stuff, you won't have much room. But if you'll go ahead and let the OS expand, it will use the entire SD card or SSD or whatever you're using. The second set of screens you will see will let you select which Wi-Fi to connect to, what country we're in, what keyboard type we want to use, and our time zones. So we'll want to set all those things. Okay. Now, if you bought some of the kits, they may come with a piece of software called Noobs, new out-of-box software. Noobs has the capability to download a number of operating systems. We see Arch Linux, Open Electric, which is a media player, Pidora, which is a kid's, a RISC OS, which is a kind of a plate operating system, but very fast. I'm not sure what RASBMC does, but we see Raspbian down there. That's the recommended one. We select that, hit install, and it will install it. Interesting thing with this is when you reboot your computer, if you hold down the shift key during the reboot, we'll come back to this menu and you can download one of the other operating systems to give it a try. Downside to this whole thing is that it does use a lot of space on your SD card, but it makes it very easy. Once we're up and running in our Raspberry Pi, there is some help in the help menu. This is pretty neat these days, actually have some help. And one of the things that you've got in here is called the bookshelf. When you open up the bookshelf, which I've done over here on the right, and I've selected Pi magazine. This is a magazine strictly about the Raspberry Pi and projects you can do with it. You can download all those that have the cloud symbol in them are still in the cloud. So all you got to do is download. Those are free for you to download. Pi is available by subscription if you want a printed copy, and they do have it on the shelf down at Micro Center if you want to buy one. There's also some books. There's another magazine called Hackspace, one called Wireframe, and Custom PC. All these downloads are free to users of the Raspberry Pi. So what do I do with my Raspberry Pis? And plural, I've got 10 of them, I think. Many of you know I'm an amateur, into amateur radio. I'm call sign KE8DOC, amateur extra rated. So I'm going to do something called APRS, which is automatic packet reporting system. As we ride our bikes down the trails, we report our position and it gets plotted on a map. It's kind of fun to do. We've got digital modes. This is HF stuff where we send a weak signal. Currently I've got, I got a connection into France right now. The VoIP, which is voice over internet protocol, like a lot of phones are now, but I use it to link repeaters together. I've got a system over here to my left that right now is linked to over 100 repeaters across the country. So a lot of ham radio stuff. I have a podcast player, kind of a media player. So when I'm out in the yard, I can listen to my favorite podcast. I have a GPS time server running. So if the internet's down, I still get the correct time for my digital modes in HF radio. I've got a slideshow player. So when the company comes over, we can bore them with our pictures on the big TV upstairs. This is a picture of my portable ham radio system. In the back of this case is a Raspberry Pi 4. It's running some software called JTX. Weak signal from Joe Taylor, Dr. Joe Taylor. That communicates with other radio stations. I'm running Grid Tracker on the right screen, and the radio is completely controlled by the Raspberry Pi. I don't have to touch the radio. So I want to thank the following. Of course, the DMA and all its members for making this possible. RaspberryPi.org and RaspberryPi.com. as well as the Raspberry Pi Wiki, where I got most of these pictures that we saw from. So I appreciate that from all these organizations. Time now for a bit of questions. Anybody want to ask about it? We'll stop sharing and let you talk about what you need.
Go ahead. Oh, okay.
You want to step up to the mic?
You guys can step up, stand up. If you stand up though, make sure you talk loud and clear and towards the machine. Yeah. Anybody got any questions? Comments?
My comment is a very good presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, you got a very good presentation. Any of the online people have any questions?
Catherine, I believe, has a question. I see her hand.
Okay, Catherine, please. Audio.
Catherine, your sound.
Sorry. Are you presenting on a Raspberry Pi as we speak?
I am not. Zoom will not run on a Raspberry Pi.
Oh, no. Okay.
There's been several people try it, and basically it won't support the video format. But what I can do is, oh, it went away, it timed out. What I do a lot is I've got a Raspberry Pi running over here, and then I use something called VNC, which is a video connection to it, and run on this Linux box that I'm using right now, so that we can see what's going on a Raspberry Pi.
Fair enough. Well, kudos for knowing the answer and knowing that.
Dave, Peter, I have a question about, are there any Zoom competitors that work on a Raspberry Pi? Or is that just too much for the video?
It's right now just too much. The Raspberry Pi is a reduced instruction set computer. And a lot of softwares don't run on those chips. The Macintosh, or Apples, whatever you call those things nowadays, are coming out. They're all going to be RISC-based computers. So I'm going to think in the near future, we're going to have something. But that's a lot more powerful RISC computer than what we're running here, with a lot more memory.
Thank you, Dave.
Yes, sir.
I would think trying to figure out how they're actually encoding the video might help, because it sounds like you got enough power on the Raspberry Pi, because they actually have 4K outputs on some of those.
Yeah,
and Zoom's only running on 1080p, I'm pretty sure.
it's the encoding.
Right.
I'm sure.
It's a compression, right? It's compression all the way, I'm sure, on Zoom.
And it's
So
one of those things that I'm quite sure that given a little bit of time, we'll see it. There's cameras from Raspberry Pi that are quite good. There are a couple of them that are very inexpensive, $10, $15, that look great. And then there's one that is called a high resolution camera, and it's about $30. And it accepts a regular C-mount lens. And it's an exceptionally good camera that you can do full control, and you can do full video on it.
Oh.
There's a pretty neat article. One of the blogs that I follow is Explaining Computers. There's a British gentleman, a technology professor, that runs that blog, and he just did a nice segment on using the Raspberry Pi in doing time-lapse photography. So you can program the camera to take a picture every whatever you want, and then put all those together. Now he does, in all honesty, he takes the video that he's created onto another PC to render it as an actual video. Yeah, so far rendering on a Raspberry Pi works. It's just slow.
Well, it's also, I mean, you're dealing with something that usually doesn't have a cooling device. And once you start getting into doing repeated pictures and throughput, I'm sure the heat would get to it.
That brings up a good subject that I probably didn't elaborate on. The Raspberry Pi in particular gets hot, very hot. The first one, a couple years ago when we did that presentation, one of the first things I did is I set it up here and I had it running. I think I was computing pi out to 1,000 digits or something, which, you know, used most of the processor, all 4 cores. And of course I go and put my finger on the CPU and my fingerprint is still etched into the top of that CPU. So everything I run here, minimum I put a heat sink on it. And most of mine have a fan on top of the heat sink. And yes, there are some crazies out there. I've seen water-cooled Raspberry Pis.
Refrigerant doesn't gain.
I couldn't hear that.
People are just making fun of the liquid cool.
No, refrigerant cool.
Refrigerant cooled.
Cool, yeah, it's as liquid cooled, and then there's one with a heat pipe. The fan and the cooling coil is bigger than the Raspberry Pi. So
We have a question here too.
yes,
I seem to remember a while back, they talked about running Windows 10 on a Raspberry Pi. Whatever became of that?
yeah, it is. It's out there. There's 2 versions of Windows. One is Windows IoT, which is simply for Internet of Things. It's not a full up Windows. And then there's a Windows for our reduced instruction set computers that runs, but it is a very stripped out version of Windows 10. And it is rather slow, but it does run.
All right, we got any more questions here?
Yeah, this is Peter. Earlier, I think before the meeting, Dave, you and another member were talking about another like a competitor of Raspberry Pi.
There's a number of competitors. The Raspberry Pi is open hardware design, just like open software. If you think you can do better, go ahead and do it. And you can market it as long as you give everybody credit. And there's a whole series of boards, some with different processors, some with Atom processors, some with bigger footprints, definitely with bigger prices that you can get. I would look at somebody like explainingcomputers.com. He's got an article that explains the difference between all of those machines. So yes, there's quite a few things out there.
All right,
Thank you.
any other questions?
If we get enough interest, I will start a Raspberry Pi, single board computer, whatever we want to call it, special interest group. If we get enough people to make it worth having, over the next couple of meetings, we'll get that settled and put something together.
Sounds like a plan.
Definitely sounds like an idea.
Yep. All righty. Well, if that is all, Dave, thanks very much.
My pleasure.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Okay, so since I kind of stepped up and did things in a little bit of a different order, I'm going to continue on. And so we have some have you heard things. We've already talked about Martin getting second place. Again, congratulations, sir. Right to repair. That's a big deal for especially a lot of us that like to do stuff like that. The term refers to the concept of allowing end users, business users, as well as consumers of technical, electronic, or automotive devices to freely repair these products in case of mechanical or technical failure. The idea is to render electronics easier and cheaper to repair, to prolong the life cycle of the devices and reduce electronic waste. Several states have already passed legislation to support the right to repair. And if I'm correct, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that Europe is going towards something of that nature. I know one of the things that they're also pushing for is making all devices also have the same power connectors. So you're not having to go out and buy 20 different adapters for 20 different devices. So I think they're pushing for the USB-C. I think the Apple devices, there's 2 of them, higher end machines that run off the USB-C. And if you're interested, I don't know if it's still out there, but there is a fellow that converted iPhone 12, I think, or 13 into a USB-C connection. However, it is not sold as a Apple device. It's buy at your own risk. This is a modified unit to do. Yes, ma'am.
I read someplace that in the UK, that it's going to be illegal to sell a cell phone that it has to be unlocked as of January 1st. They're selling all unlocked cell phones there. That's so that if you want to switch carriers, you can.
Yeah, it used to be before with cell phones, you had DMA and somebody help me with the other version. GSM, thank you. I think everybody now is going I think they're all going GSM now to do that, because you get a lot more of, you don't have to have carrier specific cell phones anymore. That's how a lot of these companies like Mint and all have bring your own cell phones, because they're all going.
Stand for?
It's been a long time since I looked at that. Yes. Global system for mobile.
Okay.
There you go. Thank you. Good. Speaking of self-service repair for Apple devices. This month, Apple announced self-service repair, which will allow consumers who are comfortable with completing their own repairs access to Apple genuine parts and tools. And you know it's going to be uber expensive. Yeah. Available first for the iPhone 12 and iPhone 13 lineups, and soon to be followed by Mac computers featuring M1 chips. Self-service repair will be available early next year in the US and expand to additional countries throughout 2022. Apple.com is where you can look that up. Trust me, just replacing the screen sometimes in an app.
One of the guys has done a caricature thing, and he has a beanie hat on. Computer.
Let's see. Framework laptop. First units begin shipping in July. This is the first laptop that offers you the freedom to customize, repair, and upgrade the unit without fear of voiding a warranty. You start with a thin, lightweight, high-performance 13.5-inch notebook. You choose the processor, the memory, the storage, kind of like an Apple Pi, or like a Raspberry Pi, sorry. And whether to fill the 4 expansion ports with adapters for USB-A, USB-C, HDMI, DisplayPort connection, micro SD, or flash storage. It comes with Windows 10 Home or Windows 10 Pro, starts at $1,000, though you can order your own do-it-yourself edition and build it yourself for $749. And if anybody wanted to write this down, it's HTTPS, you know the rest, frame.work is the name. I do remember, I can't remember if it was Dell or HP had come out with a machine like that you were supposed to be able to upgrade. And but then when they came out with the next version, none of the stuff that came out in the next version was backward compatible, and they had no offers to upgrade the old one. So these people that built these $1,500 machines expecting to be able to upgrade upgrade forever the very next year, they couldn't upgrade anymore. This is a big one. for those that use Microsoft OneDrive compatibility in 2022. OneDrive apps will stop syncing with personal versions of Windows 7, 8, and 8.1 on March 1st, 2022. Windows 7 and 8 users will need to update to 10 or lose access to OneDrive. Microsoft explains the change is being made in order to focus resources on new technologies and operating systems and to provide users with the most up-to-date and secure experience. Beginning January 1st, 2020, updates will no longer be provided for the OneDrive desktop application on your personal Windows 7, 8, and 8.1 devices, according to Microsoft's Ankita Kriti. I don't know. The closure does not affect business users in the same way, with Microsoft saying that starting January 1st, 2022, support for the OneDrive desktop application for business will be aligned with the Microsoft support lifecycle with Windows 7 and Windows 8.1 are in extended support until January 10th, 2023. However, Windows 8 reached end of support on January 12th, 2016, meaning it no longer receives vital security updates that keep devices safe from the latest cyber threats. So, yeah. So I always recommend to my, to people that I know, especially that are still running Windows 7, that you should not use that machine online anymore unless you can't, because you can't get security updates anymore. It's just not worth it. If you're people like Gary, just get in Ubuntu and move on. Hey, Gary Ganger, this might be right up your alley. The Mobile Phone Museum. The museum was set up online by British industry analyst Ben Wood, who collected thousands of phones as a hobby. A launch event was held in London a few days ago where he proudly displayed some of the oldest and ugliest devices. The collection currently has over 2,000 individual models from more than 200 different brands. Each donated device is cataloged, labeled, photographed, and stored in a secure facility. New devices are added on a daily basis. The museum can be found at www.mobilephonemuseum.com. There's also a video on bbc.com/news/AV/technology-5943293. If you want to see it before you leave, hit me up. So yeah, and can anybody remember now I know I can remember watching a James Bond movie with Sean Connery that they had the radio phones. So I know they've been around for a while, but can anybody remember the very first mobile phone?
73 Motorola with the Dynatech.
But what did they do with the demonstration on?
Called his competitor and said, "Hi."
Yeah, but who there was a most video, because I just watched it the other day, sitting in a K-car convertible making a cell phone call.
This is 73.
This was before that. This was after that.
This
This was considered the first quote unquote consumer cell
Somebody's
phone.
raising her hand behind you.
No, she was turning the light out.
Oh. Because I can remember seeing that video. He picked up the phone, he was sitting in a K-car convertible, and he made the phone call. It was red. Wasn't the Iacocca. But it
Was that the mobile phone that was called the Brick? The Motorola, yeah?
This was the one that was tied into the car. You had to have it tied into your car. You had to have it installed by a professional.
Ah, okay.
That was I think you're thinking of the first actual cell phone, but this was the first consumer cell phone, consumer grade cell phone. If you ever get interested, just look it up. It's pretty neat. All right. So that's all we have as far as what have you heard? Anybody have any computer related questions or anything to kind of pick the brain of the brain trust?
Gary,
Yes.
Mike stuff. What about the APCO meetings they're going to have this December here?
Go right ahead, sir.
On December 1st, they're going to have an electronic holiday and greeting card presentation, and also not your parents' PowerPoint, how to use PowerPoint, and actually make a photo album, I think, in there. They're going to show that. And since that's tomorrow, you got till 11:30 tonight to register for that. Are you going to send that out, Peter, or not? I don't have the address list to do that. And
I
then-
think I've been on top of sending it out when I get announcements from APCUG. We should have one, but I'll try to find it and
Judy sent it out Sunday.
Did I send it out Sunday? Okay.
She sent it out Sunday, right?
Oh, okay.
At 1:44.
If anybody
PM.
needs it resent, send a email to hesp@DMA1.
But basically, they're having one each Wednesday. And then on December 9th, they're going to have make your own 2022 photo calendar at home and how to put that stuff together and load those things. And then the 15th, they're going to have Learning Linux, their number 11 workshop, the software installations and removals on how to install different Linux versions and stuff. For tomorrow's one, you got till 11:30 tonight to register for that to see it. And they do these. I wasn't sure when they were doing them, but they do it at 12 noon on Wednesdays for Eastern time anyway. So that first one sounds like they're going to be some good stuff, because they're going to show some really neat things about PowerPoint, I think, and how to make a photo album you can share to people and stuff. So and I can read the descriptions if you like, but anyway, that's a quick summary.
All right. Anything else?
Kathleen has her hand up.
Yes, Kathleen.
Hi, I have two questions. The first one is, does anyone know if they're refurbishing laptops and computers to sell at Goodwill? I was trying to find a laptop and don't seem to have one in Springfield really. And I guess they have one left, but it's pretty small. And
Kathleen?
I called the outlet store and they didn't have any.
Hey, Kathleen, if you pick one up, get a hold of me. I'll gladly refurbish it for you.
Okay. All right. And then
There's a,
We don't deal with that.
Oh, we don't?
No, we don't. I thought I saw laptops at Beaver Creek Goodwill, and we can ask Chester, he might know.
okay.
Yeah, Chester definitely be the man to contact on that too.
Also, I noticed that Walmart has refurbished computers now. If you go to Walmart's website, and the prices don't look too bad. They look like they're selling. It looks like they're selling off their corporate or their salespeople's computers or their employees' computers that the company has furnished to their employees. That's what it looks like.
Good idea.
Excuse me, Micro Center always has a section on their website of refurbs. And a lot of times these are simply models that are no longer current. That's what I'm running right now, and very happy with it. Just check their website, and they do have them in stock, usually at Sharonville.
Yeah, I mean, if you're trying to run games and stuff and these real high-end games, you're probably not going to be happy with an older computer. But if you're doing like what we're doing here, just the Zoom meetings and stuff like this, even Microsoft has some new computers they're selling for $400. And so, I mean, if you're trying to stay at a decent price, there's some out there that are under $500 that look pretty nice.
All right.
These surfaces now like this one I have for fourth and third or fourth generation one for a couple $100. I think I seen one for $150 the other day for a third generation.
It'd be nice.
Yep, the Microsoft Surface tablets.
Yeah, I loved my Surface. I had it for only a short period, but it was an RT version in the
Yeah.
8.
I'm using a 5 right now, so that's what we're talking on right now is a 5,
Okay.
Surface 5. Does that answer your question, Kathleen?
Yeah, my second question is, we bought the house next door to us, which is really close. It's only about 4 feet away. And I'm gonna move my home business over there, but I'd like to just jump our internet over there so that I'm still on the same network as here and I don't have to pay for another internet service. Am I thinking right that what I really need is called a bridge?
No, the easiest way now, if you're going to be wired, you'll probably need something like that. But
Yeah.
get you a mesh network.
A what?
Get you a
Mesh
nice
network?
decent mesh, MESH, mesh network. I just picked one up. Now mine's a little more expensive, but you can get ones now, especially the new Wi-Fi 6s, if you're willing to drop about $300 on one. Some of those have ranges of 5,000 feet.
Okay,
Mine is-
but it's just Wi-Fi. So what I need to do is convert because none of my stuff is Wi-Fi over there.
If you get the right ones, some of them have a network connection, a network port on them, an
Ethernet port. Okay.
Also, if you get a mesh,
so you just hook that to a switch and you can connect that to everything and just run it.
What you need to do is contact this company.
What are you showing? Wi-Fi range extender. Yeah, I need something more than just a regular Wi-Fi extender.
Oh, the mesh network, I'm telling you, 5,000.
Yeah.
And you get one with, like I said, with an Ethernet port, just look at the different brands. And
Okay.
you have a wireless connection from your house to the other house. And then you
Okay.
just put a switch on it and you can connect as many devices as you want over that internet.
Okay.
a lot of mesh networks come in units of 3. So you could put one at the far end of each house and one close to the middle. And see how that would. I'd try that first before you buy any more modules.
Yeah.
If you're going to go Wi-Fi.
Yeah, just do the research and make sure that the satellites come with an Ethernet connection on them. Some do, some don't. The lower end ones tend not to. But the Wi-Fi 5s are starting to come down, the Wi-Fi 5 mesh networks, because 6 is becoming more predominant. Yeah, you should be able to pick one up, and I think that'll do you quite well.
If both houses are on the same transformer, there's even things that you can plug into the wall that are connect via, through your phone lines. And that might even work if both houses are on the same transformer.
The same phone transformer?
Power.
Power
Transformer, okay.
Those have kind of gone away. I haven't seen much along those any lately.
I saw one just recently. I was looking for something and saw that, and it was better priced than a lot of other things.
Yeah, but
you'd have to know if you're on the same power transformer.
No, that's easy.
I think so. Yeah, we must be.
I'm with my neighbor on one side and not on the other, so it's going to depend. Double check.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I said, you can hit me up, and Deb was just saying that if you look on Consumer Reports, they have a good list of mesh networks. I didn't know you needed something like that. I just sold one.
Darn. Okay.
She knows my info.
Well, I need to keep you up to date with what's going on here, Gary.
Yep, just hit me up.
All right, will do.
All right, all right. We have any more questions or anything?
Catherine asked me about running on a Raspberry Pi. So I'm going to share my screen for just a moment.
Okay.
And I am logged in to a Raspberry Pi through something called VNC.
Oh, okay.
Vnc.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, it's a Video Connect
Oh,
over Ethernet. So across my Ethernet system, I'm connecting to this Raspberry Pi 400 that's over here. And let's just see, Office,
Oh, cool.
programming, ham radio. I added that. Help. There's the bookshelf. So we're actually running a Raspberry Pi live across the internet to this computer.
Okay. Nice.
oh, wow.
And the program I'm running is Rememia, REMMIMA. There's Vnc Viewer and a bunch of other ones that are the client side. So that is VNC is built into the Raspberry Pi software. You just turn it on.
You can also run the Windows remote desktop.
Yeah.
They have a server that talks that
Really?
protocol, so you could run just the remote desktop from a Windows workstation and connect to the Pi.
Wow. I think it would be fun to have a SIG for Raspberry Pi. I don't know what I would build, but it sounds like fun.
Well, it is. It's a lot of fun just to play with it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like having the Commodore 64s. They were so cheap, you know, at the end, they were running about $100 a piece. And that allowed you to do a lot of things that the Raspberry Pi can do now. And about, a single board computer.
All right, guys.
There's
How much do I need to save to do a project?
there's a new small business in Englewood that's refurbishes computers. He buys lots and he'll sell parts too. I was able to buy a couple sticks of DDR4 RAM, which is pretty nice.
Where's that at?
It's right on 40 in downtown Englewood.
What's it called?
I can't remember the name of it. Sorry.
For you, Ken, that's like living down the street from a crack dealer.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, he had a MacBook Pro. He hates MacBook Pros, but he had a MacBook Pro. It's a couple years old, but I guess the hard drive died on it. But I picked that up for $100. So it's a decent display, and it's missing the drive, but I put Linux on an external drive. It's doing that quite nicely. A thumbstick, it'll boot Linux nicely on a thumbstick. Pretty incredible display.
All right, guys, we only got a few minutes left. So any other last minute questions or anything?
Just a last minute comment. Some 401ks or some investment plans after a certain age require you to spend a certain percentage of that fund, or at least take some of the money out of that fund. If you choose to do that, please consider Dayton Microcomputer Association and the Dayton Foundation's. You could donate through the Dayton Foundation to the Dayton Microcomputer Association. And of course, either way will get you a tax deduction. But of course, always talk to your accountant first before you make such plans.
All righty. All right, guys. So if that's all we have, then
I got a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Is there anybody in the club that does eBay regularly that would be willing to put on a class?
You mean selling?
Selling, yes, I'm sorry.
I'd like to attend that class too.
I haven't done an eBay sale in a long time. Hit me up about Facebook, but I don't know. how to-
I'm actually getting ready to do some, so I mean, I might be able to, if I get through this and keep doing it, I'll let you know.
All righty. Very good. Thank you so much.
All right,
Oh,
guys.
by the way, the government is looking at taxing PayPal income. Okay, I don't think they're going to do it for year 2022, but I would expect it for 2023. It's in the government's deciding right now.
They actually already do it. Well, it's never their damn business. Okay, well, they'll be sending out forms now. PayPal themselves is going to be doing this. All right, so for you online people, we have 2 Raspberry Pi Zero.
Boards with accessories.
Boards with accessories. We have a case, a 32 gigabyte card, and a power supply. And it has adapters for mini HDMI and mini USB.
It's a source.
Oh, that's a source on where to get the adapters. There's a card in here. There's a case. So we got 2 of these. We have a 128 gigabyte purple thumb drive, 128 gigabyte
Micro Center.
from Micro Center. These have lifetime warranties, don't they?
I don't know.
I believe they did.
3 years.
Well, if it dies, not
If you
working.
win it, you can let us know.
And the last thing we have is a Wise watch.
Now, that's got health monitoring, but it doesn't have messaging, so it doesn't require a smartphone.
Yeah, it doesn't require a smartphone because it doesn't do messaging and stuff. It's more for health. Make sure your health.
It'll receive messages. It will receive text messages.
Okay.
You get
The phone
notifications.
does.
The watch does. If
Well, I
it's
mean,
synced to
yeah.
the phone. If it's Bluetooth synced to the phone.
Okay. All right. I was just going, okay. Yeah, you have to have compatible with Android 5 and above, which most phones, that's not going to be an issue. iOS 9.0. So there's the door prizes for this evening. Who's doing the first drawing?
Whew, pardon me.
For me? We don't have any guests here. Everybody's a member.
Jeff Walton.
Jeff Walton would be online.
Jeff, you with us?
Still with us?
Are you listening, Jeff?
Yes, I am.
What would you like, sir?
I think I'd take the Raspberry Pi.
All right, one is spoken for.
All right, Jeff, we'd like you to draw a ticket.
I'm reaching through the screen to draw.
Now, if I draw my own, it's just a coincidence. Mike, stop.
Mike, stop. Are you still with us, Mike?
Yep, he's right.
I'm still here.
What would you like, Mike? We have another Pi, the thumb drive, or the watch?
I guess the thumb drive, because I don't know what the watch is really very much. Doesn't like works with my stuff.
Okay.
All right, so we still got a Pi and a watch.
Did you draw one for me?
Same disclaimer.
Let's see if we can find his. Oh, we got somebody here. Oh, you got your glasses on.
Wow.
The last 3 is 556. Is somebody here? There you go. Let me guess. You want the Pi, don't you? Well, I don't know. Or you want the watch? I've got a Pi. The power supply card.
They're pieces of pop.
Go ahead and draw it.
Draw one. Here's the.
Last thing's a watch.
Okay, this is
Yeah, I didn't break it.
544.
544?
That's me, but I'll pass.
Oh. Well, then would you draw a ticket? Then we have somebody here.
Somebody here. Now Martin declined.
Read that. 555?
5-5, wait a minute. 5-6-5.
565.
Oh, that's me.
565.
You have to have it talking to your cell phone, or can it work standalone?
It can work standalone, but you won't be able to get messages and stuff. It'll just be one of those fitness type watches.
I guess I could use it that way. Watch on 4.2.
You need an upgrade. All right.
Someday.
We're good.
All right, guys. That's all we have. We have anybody that wants anything for go to the order? All right. Well, Peter will be putting out about the Christmas meeting, which will be online only. We will not be meeting here. So it'll be online only. Keep your eye out on the webpage, and for those that are on the email, go get the email as well. All right, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great presentation.
Yes,
Oh,
thanks, Dave.
Yeah, thank
Appreciate
you.
that.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that came out of the Linux question answer thing that AppCode had was people are having trouble with dual booting Windows and Linux. So their workaround was to go load Linux on a flash drive you can plug in and run it that way.
Right.
All right, guys, I gotta shut down because I gotta get out of here. So.
Okay.
Good night, Gary.
Good night.
Good night, Gary.
Good night.
One
Take it
thing
easy,
I,
everybody.
Okay, I'm still host, so I'll sit here for a little while and see what happens.
sounds good. I've got one thing that I wanted to mention for the upcoming meeting here. I don't know if you guys are watching news at all, but they've got that Wright Brothers building that they're thinking about tearing down, and people are trying to stop them, so they're taking them to court on it. And it's just a thought. We were looking for a building, and that might be something to do if we can get people interested in raising money for saving the building. I mean, it looks like it needs a whole new facade, and I mean, it's going to need a lot of work. But if we help people get that done, it might be an interesting project to get involved in, and it'd give us a place for the computer museum.
If you're driving westbound on 3rd Street, it's the old Gem City Ice Cream building.
Yeah, I've
and
never
it happens to
never
be the
been in
site.
there. It would be nice to go look at it.
I understand it needs some work.
Yeah, they
Yeah, oh, it
had some
does.
pictures in the newspaper about how bad it does look inside.
Oh yeah, you could tell that it's like falling apart. So it needs, but some people are trying to stop them just because of the historical aspect of the building. Because it would really almost need to be, the facade needs to be taken off because you can see the grout is just gone in all the brick, right? So all the bricks got to come down and go back up, which is not going to be a cheap move. And that's why they just want to take the building down. Probably might be cheaper to do that, but if you can use the original brick, and the brick itself doesn't look bad, but the grout is, probably, I mean, think about this, if it had to be something they were in, it's over 100+ years old. I mean, that's what happened to Antioch. It was that they're trying to save the campus, and it's like, here's this building that's from the 1840s, and you're like going, guys, this building just needs to be rebuilt.
They said in the newspaper article that the neighbor has been having bricks or part of the building fall on his yard, and he's worried that it's going to hit his building.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I mean, but I'm just saying that we need a building. We're thinking about it. If people are able to stop them from tearing this down, it might be something to find out who's doing it, and let's try to contact them about it. Just a thought.
Good idea. We do need a building.
And I've always wanted to actually do like a Raspberry Pi kind of thing, and it might be interesting to do it attached to a bike.
I'm playing with that right now,
Okay.
but I think I'm going to do it with an Arduino. So because the Arduino supports interrupt.
Okay. What's
And-
the advantage of the interrupt?
A small, fast pulse. The Raspberry Pi's got a good chance of missing it because it's
Okay.
all doing something else in the operating system.
Have you ever seen the hub on like a car that has the
Oh yeah,
points, and it sort of it's a continuous thing, right? So you sort of know how fast the wheel is turning.
well, it sends a pulse, and it depends on the manufacturer. Some of them have 10, some of them have 12 magnets on them.
Yeah, well, the one, I think it's even got more than that on the Chrysler that I have, but it's,
Yeah,
I was in, is the concept of that, just having a hub on the bike to monitor its actual speed would be the key.
What I'm doing with mine, and I haven't put it on my bike yet, is there's a reflector that goes around once every turn.
Oh, right.
And I'm just going to put I've got an infrared sensor I'm playing with, and it looks like it
We'll monitor that.
and just count how many times the wheel goes around or how many seconds it takes for the wheel to go around.
If you went with a hub-like sensor, it might be smarter instead of just monitoring it every once turn, because you don't know how long that turn's going to take. Like, let's say you do stop or something like that.
It takes more horsepower, more battery power. You got to take those things into consideration. It's worth playing with, though.
Yeah, I mean, something that's constantly monitoring the speed of the hub is not a bad idea.
But the Raspberry Pi, because we're running an operating system, it's off doing something all the time. It may be updating the video, it may be talking to a serial port, it may, whatever's going on out there. And a pulse from something like that would come and go before it recognizes it, before you can get back to look at it. Okay?
Would come and go, you mean if you had the pulse from a hub type thing?
Yeah, you'd be missing some pulses.
Right. Yeah, because the bicycle is not going really fast usually.
Yeah, especially when I'm riding. But but it's still fast enough that it can get ahead of the Raspberry Pi. So you use something more like an Arduino, which has an interrupt, which says, hey, service this now. No matter what you're doing, set that aside and service this now. It'll keep up with that kind of stuff. Especially if you simply use the Arduino.
See, I need
send
to
information to the Raspberry Pi for display.
Right. I mean, I sort of get the concept of the Arduino because it captures something that the Raspberry Pi might miss, let's say, right? Is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's the Arduino and the type of the Pico and all those other guys. That is all hardware.
Right.
We're not running a bunch of software to catch those pulses.
Right. No matter how you do it.
It's a similar thing, but it's a more positive catch, especially if you're running something relatively fast. I've got an IO board, and you got some switches, and if you push buttons, and if you just tap them, it can miss them. So, it's something you want to consider is how fast those pulses are going to arrive and how long their duration is. I spent most of my career in automated machine tools.
Okay.
And using pulses from shaft encoders and things like that to keep track. Glass scales with 1 micron resolution. So we were getting a pulse every micron of movement. So yeah, you've got to respond to those quickly. You got to do dedicated hardware.
Very good. Well,
Well-
I need some more liquids here, so I need to go do that. I might as well leave the computer here and sign out. So I'm going to get off, but I'll see everybody hopefully on Monday. Sorry, I forgot last month's meeting. I didn't think about it until like 9 p.m. So shoot
Well-
myself in the head here.
Take it easy, and I'll be looking for that message from you, Pete, when gonna have a December get together.
You're muted, Peter.
Yeah,
Peter, you're
Thank you.
muted.
Yeah, I got it now.
there it is.
Thank you. Thank you for the reminder. I'll put it on Meetup and I'll send it to Gladdy, and I think she distributes that
Yeah.
to the members.
Okay, thanks a lot. See you later.
Thank you. Take it easy.
Ah,
Thanks for
Night,
staying,
all.
Dave. Great presentation, Dave. I learned
Yep.
quite a bit about Raspberry Pi, and I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Dave.
Yeah, because this went in a little different direction than the last time. So I learned some too. Appreciate that.
Very good.